Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning if you are in America, or in South America, Central America, or good evening if you are in Asia. Thanks for joining us. Let's take a 1 minute, 2 minutes maximum just to allow everybody to connect to our new webinar here. And then we start. We already have our friends, our panel here connected. So let's take really a few seconds and then we go. Just a matter of reminding you that our webinars use the form of smart brevity. At least we try to be smart. Sure, we try to be short as well. So we're going to take less than 1 hour. And the purpose is just to provide everybody with a snapshot. And then, of course, if you want to go more deeply in the discussion, if you want to have a more articulated thought and arguments, again, you are free to get in touch with us or join some of our other webinars. So I think we can start. We're still missing one of our guests that's supposed to be late, or I was told is joining, and that's the Member of Parliament, Mr. Fiocchi here. But let me start by thanking everybody, and again, welcome to our new webinar, and particularly welcome to the one that are going to bed in Asia. And I see there's a lot of Asians connected here, as usual, following our, I would say, global webinars as well. Good morning to the one in the United States and Central and South America that are connecting right now, and hopefully it will be a great day for you. And good afternoon to the one that are connected from Europe. This is a sustainable nutrition series organized by Competere, and as you know, the purpose by now is usually the same. It's to how we feed the planet when we have 7.6 billion of people that are starving and very hungry. And how can we do that in a very sustainable way? And for the past 6 months, we have been discussing the various arguments related to sustainable nutrition. And lately, we have spoken with the last seminar before Christmas about zero deforestation, where it's possible to have a zero deforestation, and how this can be represented on products, fruit products that you can find at the supermarket, basically. And today, we want to go more into details about that, and particularly we want to talk about the front of package and the green labels. So how is the European Commission dealing with that, what the European Parliament will do, and how European consumers will benefit from that, but also how the industry, the food industry, will be affected or will play an important role in establishing how the labels will be. As we know, it's very important for consumers, and this is the ideology, the principles that we have at Competere as a liberal think tank, how these labels will affect the free choice of consumers. We believe that consumers must have the right information, the right knowledge to make authentic free choices. But on the other side, and we have experienced that, we know that labels in a way and the choice and the attitude of consumers is also influencing the industry and particularly the entire supply chain. So we know that consumers today are likely very active, very proactive, and in some cases they have determined the choices of reformulation of products exactly through labeling. And also we experience that through some fake news. Sometimes consumers get misled and they push food companies to make choices also through the labels, so they're replacing some of their ingredients with other ingredients just to have a good label on their product. So we're going to talk both about front of package, so the health side, but also green labels on the sustainable side. And today, does it make sense to separate the two, or it makes sense to have a common discussion on both? Because at the end, as consumers, we're going to the supermarket, we're buying one product, and we want to have, in a way, simple information that's telling us it's a healthy product, and on the other side, it's a sustainable product. I just want to remind that since the last time we met talking about zero deforestation, one of the key messages from producing countries outside of Europe is, if we want to have a fair discussion in Europe, we should also consider those countries and those players on the supply chains that are outside Europe, because of course, most of the business happens outside of Europe, where these products are farmed and they grow and then they come to Europe. So today we have two distinguished guests from the European Parliament. One is Pietro Fiocchi, that has not joined us, so I have to play a bit here his role. And then we were supposed to have Mr. De Meo, a member of Parliament for the People's Party. that unfortunately had an unfortunate problem today, and instead he has asked his chief of staff exactly a few minutes ago to join us. That is Stefano Matonte. So I will start with Stefano, and then as soon as Pietro will join us, the word goes to Pietro. And then we move on with our three distinguished guests. One is Francesca Morgante from the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. Then we have Amarit Soata from Ecovia as the president. And then we have Paolo Vergano from Frattini Vergano European Lawyers. As I said, we got to be very short. Just a reminder, this event is going to be recorded, so will remain available. We will also produce some talking points after all the talks we get, and in 60 minutes we will be gone. If you have any question or any comment, there are two tools: the chat that you can use. Also, if you want to inform us about events, activities that you're doing, we'll be very happy to share them. And as well, there is the question and answer. The Sustainable Nutrition platform is taking shape, and some of the materials are already available on our website. Most of it will be available in a few weeks on our website, and you are very welcome to join us to provide your inputs, your suggestion, recommendation, and also your support. And we're very happy to work together with all of you. Let me start, Stefano. The word is yours. I know you have some talking points from the Member of Parliament, so floor is yours.
Pietro, well, I would like to share with you. So basically, it is important to consider not only the nutritional terms, but also the entire supply chain, because the environmental and social sustainability of the production is a path that begins in the field and reaches up to the table. And this is how, for example, the European institution tackle it with the Farm to Fork strategy. The approach must be systemic, and therefore the label that appears on the packages of the food we buy can be fundamentally an ally. A well-made label not only allows the consumer to make conscious choices, but brings them closer to the producers, allowing the latter to leave a trace even in the final product. The current labeling system is a complex and often not very transparent tool for the consumers, and torturous for those who want to choose a sustainable production model. The label must give more information than is expected today. It leaves apart many things, and others are treated superficially or in a way that result unclear to the customer. It does not provide information on producers, on the origin of the raw material, on plant varieties, or about the territories where they are grown. There are at the moment two main labeling schemes we are considering. At the base of the two systems, Nutri-Score and Nutri-Inform, this is a fundamental difference. Nutri-Score is not based on a scientific principle, but hinge on nutritional profiles and algorithms that are not recognized by science, in which they aim to discriminate against this or that specific food. The most widespread and consolidated scientific literature, however, underlies that there are no good foods or bad foods, but only more or less balanced diets, and that every food can become part of a balanced diet in the right measures. Nutri-Inform is based exactly on this assumption, which does not classify any food as unhealthy in itself, but illustrate the right amount to be taken daily. Through the numbers displayed on the boxes and the graphic symbol of the battery, citizens will have the opportunity to easily understand both the amount of calories and nutrients they consume in a certain product and the incidence of these nutrients on the general daily diet. Compared to systems that are based on the evaluation of individual products, Nutri-Inform aims to create a varied and balanced diet based on the concept that any food can be part of a healthy diet if consumed in the correct quantities and frequencies. Furthermore, the specific indication of the amount of nutrient is more suited to the different needs of people to unlikely overall judgment of the production made by the Nutri-Score, which does not allow the consumer to understand how many sugars, salts, or fat the food contains. The Nutri-Score has a basic flow. The ranking is drawn up on the basis of content of nutrients, so fat, saturated fat, sugars, and salt, and calories present in 100 grams of product. A quantity that in case of olive oil, for example, or many other products, is more than double the ordinary dose recommended by nutritionists. Nutrition is a fundamental factor for health, and consumers have the right to inform based on rigorous scientific basis. From this perspective, also in the view of the decision at the European level, the Nutri-Inform battery labeling system adopted by Italy is better than Nutri-Score because it provides nutritional information referring to the individual portions. To conclude, these are some of the reasons Mr. De Meo considered while amending the text of the Farm to Fork strategy at the European Parliament. As a member of the Agri Committee, Mr. De Meo considered nutrition as a fundamental aspect of the lives of the European citizens, and is working to ensure a clear, transparent, and helpful labeling which can help the consumer to their everyday decisions, and that they can support a better knowledge of the food they eat and consequently the adoption of a better diet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stefano, and thank you for being here instead of Mr. De Meo, and please bring us the best regards to him and his family, and hopefully we will let him back to us very soon. Please stay here with us in case there's any question. Let me move instead ahead while we're waiting for Mr. Fiocchi, and again, you mentioned and you went through following an Italian approach to the Nutri-Score, and obviously that's the Italian approach. Also, guys, I want to stress what's happening in Spain, where the Spanish government wants to introduce the Nutri-Score, but there's somehow a debate because they want to introduce the Nutri-Score, if I understand correctly, but at the same time, some local producers have already said, yes, you use the Nutri-Score, but not for me. So olive oil industry, ham industry are saying, I'm not part of the Nutri-Score. So very, very interesting discussion around there, and thanks for your positioning. Let's move more on the side of the, if I can call, socially responsible and green labeling. And I want to do it, and very, very much thank you for being here with Amrit Sahota from Ecovia Intelligence, and you are the president of there. And again, if you want to know all the bios, for brevity, I'm not going to read the entire bio, but you can find them on competere.eu on our page, or the page of the event. You can find all the full bio, the websites where you can find more information as well. Amrit, I leave the floor to you. I know you have a presentation, so let's see if it works. It should work. And the floor is, of course, yours.
Okay, I'm going to be sharing the screen. Okay, I'm trying to share my screen here.
Here you go.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, wonderful. Works well.
Okay.
Just make it full screen. Wonderful. Works
Okay.
well. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Now, what I want to do, I just want to give a brief introduction to ethical labels over the next few minutes. Labels is really the focus of this session. Quick introduction to our company. We've been around since 2001. We do market research consulting on natural and organic products. We've actually been doing research on ethical labels and organic foods for 20 years. And we also do a summit in this area called the Sustainable Food Summit, which is online. So that's just a very quick introduction. Now, when we talk about ethical labels, we're really talking about eco labels or certified products. And the way we define this, it's a labeling scheme that represents some environmental, ethical, or sustainability attributes. The biggest label in the world is organic. The market for organic foods is now about $112 billion US. That was launched in the 1990s. Fair trade is the second biggest ethical label, and then you've got others. Now here I've got a timeline just to show you how ethical labels have evolved in the food industry. It's not a new phenomena. Almost 100 years ago, the Demeter label was introduced. We saw Rainforest Alliance in 1987, and the organic labels were really introduced on the national level in 2002. But what's important here is that most of the developments have happened in the last 10, 15 years. That's where we're seeing most of the labels being introduced, not just here in Europe, at the global level. And the general trend is this. We've got over 200 different labels representing some environmental, sustainability, or social aspects in the food industry. Organic is just one, fair trade is just one, RSPO, which Francesco will speak about, is just another one. One latest development in the last 10 years is that we're seeing more and more labels being introduced for single ingredients, whereas organic, fair trade, Rainforest Alliance were for all types of agricultural products. We're seeing schemes like RSPO for sustainable palm oil, Bonsucro for sustainable sugar, RTRS, and Proterra for sustainable soybeans. We're also seeing a sustainable rice eco-label being introduced, and that's backed by the United Nations. And we expect to see a label for sustainable coconuts and coconut oil as well. And as a result of this, we're seeing products being marketed on their labels. So this is becoming very common, whereby you're seeing products having 3, 4, sometimes even 5 labels. And Just to give an example here, Coffee Masters, the brand is called Triple Certified Espresso Beans. It's certified organic, certified fair trade, certified Rainforest Alliance, and also another scheme here as well. And the future, just to finish up, to give you some food for thought, I'm going to give a quote from the British author Philip Pullman. People are too complicated to have simple labels. And maybe that's going to be the future. We're going to see even more and more different labels, whether they're health, sustainability, ethical, etc. As our lives are becoming more complicated, we want to see more and more different labels representing different attributes. And that's the thought I'm going to leave you with.
Thank you so much, Amarit. And we're coming back to you with some questions later on exactly about what is the right label and what the European Union will choose, if many labels, one label, two labels. That's a discussion that we're having right now, and we're very curious. Before going to Paolo Vergano, that is an expert in labels, at least food labels, let me turn instead to Francesca Morgante. And Francesca is representing a certification label, I would say, that you can find on some actually say more and more products at the supermarket, as Francesca represents the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. And you said it right, Amarit, there's more and more ingredients or producers, for instance, of vegetable oils or other food products, are now developing certification schemes, and they are also developing sort of roundtable of sustainable something. But let's start with RSPO, that has certainly been one of the pioneer in the area, at least for the palm oil industry. Francesca, floor is yours, and I know as well you have a presentation.
Sure. Thank you, Pietro. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to have this possibility to bring the experience and the case of sustainable palm oil in this context. We have, as you said, experience with labeling. We have a label which goes on products, so I'm here to present our experience on that. Let me share my screen. And usually that's the most difficult part for every speaker rather than the speech itself.
It works well.
Okay, you see my screen, right?
Wonderful,
so,
yes.
A brief introduction about myself. I'm appointed as a Market Development Manager for Europe at RSPO, and I joined the association in 2018. My role consists of engaging with companies which are in Europe, which mostly use sustainable palm oil, and to stimulate the uptake of certified sustainable palm oil. So when speaking about palm oil, you know that sometimes the debate can go very emotional or controversial. It's a commodity which has many opinion on that, but I want to start from key facts, which are very important when speaking about this crop, especially in a worldwide context. So basically, we know that the global demand for vegetable oils has grown in the past years, and this is expected to continue to grow in the future. That because of the growing population. So we know that palm oil as a commodity, as an oil crop, is here to stay, and we need to find a way to let this be grown in a sustainable way. Palm oil per se, it's already something that I would call a sustainable crop by itself, because its outcome per hectare, it's very high compared to the other vegetable oils. It can be 4 to 10 times more. The outcome can be more than the other oils like rapeseed oil, sunflower oil, or soybean oil. So basically, this means that it uses less land, so less land has to be converted into agricultural land to produce the crop compared to if we switch to other oils. And it's very important to consider in the global supply chain. Something which is also key when considering the impact of cultivation worldwide is that we are speaking about farmers. As it was said by the speakers who spoke before, it's very important to connect the end consumers with the farmers, no matter if they are the farmers which live here and work here in Europe, or if are the farmers which are elsewhere in the world. We must ensure ways to have this connection, because, for example, in the case of palm oil, these people have been able to alleviate and go out of poverty because of the cultivation of palm oil. But these are the positive things. We know that this has come to a cost, and this has come to a cost in the past, especially with regards to the problem we know related to deforestation, related to biodiversity loss, and to social and workers' rights abuse. So the reason why the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil was exactly to tackle these challenges and to make sure that the crop could coexist with nature and with good practices. So the RSPO organization was founded in 2004. It's a multi-stakeholder organization where all the sectors of the palm oil industry are represented. So we have the growers, we have the processors and traders, consumer good manufacturers, retailers, but also NGOs and the financial sector. All these members, we have 5,000 members worldwide, need to find consensus on all the activities of the organization. That's why it's a very complex process, and this guarantees that basically when consensus is reached, then you can move forward. And our main activities, as it was already said, it's about certification. We have two certification systems. One is to ensure that palm oil is grown in a sustainable way, and it applies to the plantation, it applies to the smallholders. And the other one is to ensure the traceability of the palm oil, which has been produced sustainably, towards the whole supply chain till the end consumer. We do that by working with independent certifiers, and we have also an accreditation system for the certification bodies working with us. All of this, which is already quite complex, as you may guess, it has to be communicated to the consumer. And for doing that, we have, among other tools, of course, our trademark. It's a good debate to think how consumers perceive trademark, and especially if you think, as it was mentioned before, this is a single commodity trademark. So it means that it represents just one ingredient which is present in everyday products. So we may see the trend as the one that Amarit presented before, of products who wants to highlight the presence of certain ingredients. But with regards to palm oil, we have also seen that some companies wanted to not to put the light on the ingredient itself. So this means that even if it's sustainably sourced, then maybe they are not going to use the trademark. So it's a bit challenging to stimulate the companies to use the trademark, but luckily we have seen an increase in interest from the companies, and now the trademark of RSPO is available on 400 consumer products and in many more markets, and especially in Europe, those markets which are leading the way when it comes to the use of trademark are Germany, UK, and Italy. So there is still room for improvement on that. And as a global organization, we ask ourselves how we could strengthen our activities and how we could engage more with the consumers. So we think that there is room for more collaborations with the public sector, namely now that we are having this panel with the European Commission and the European Parliament, because there may be action which could be reinforcing one another. I think it's very important that any sustainability scheme or sustainability score or Nutri-Score who wants to gather information for the consumer would take into account all the efforts that single scheme supply chains like RSPO have done so far, because the supply chains of these ingredients are really complex. And it's a challenge to transmit the right information. So we hope that all the work that has been done by us in this nearly 20 years of existence will be enhanced and not blocked. We have started to collaborate more and more with the other sustainability scheme. I think this is very key for future developments. So basically what we think would be needed, it's a sort of complementarity between public policies and framework and what sustainability schemes can offer to the consumers in terms of transparency, in terms of cleaning the supply chains and so on. Just to give you an example of something that worked, it was the inclusion of the RSPO requirement within the EU green public procurement, meaning that all the procurement done in the EU must source sustainable ingredients, and that's a way of how the public sector and the sustainability schemes could work together. Of course, there may be others, and we are all there to contribute to this debate. So I think that for the moment it's everything, but I'm open to the question and to the debate later.
Thank you so much, Francesca, for introducing us to a very strong sustainable scheme, or green label, as you want to see, and a scheme that you can find, a certification that you can find on many products at the supermarket. And we see how this is going to work with the European Commission, and how the European Commission is going to deal with schemes like the Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. Let me also welcome Pietro Fiocchi here. I know he was on the phone, so you can finish your conference call, Mr. Fiocchi. Let me turn to Paolo Vergano, and then I will turn to you again, Mr. Fiocchi. So we started with the Chief of Staff of MP De Meo, and then we end with you. But in the middle, I will go for the next 5 minutes to Paolo Vergano, who's as a lawyer, and Frattini and Vergano, European lawyers. So Paolo, to you, you are an expert, and you've been dealing with labels for the past, basically for your entire life, and particularly on free from that we are experiencing very much in Europe. So Paolo, the floor is to you.
Yes, thank you, Pietro. Thanks also for the invitation. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you are. Maybe I should start by slightly correcting you, Pietro. I'm not an expert in food labels. Sadly, I'm an expert in the impact that labeling has on operators. I'm a trade lawyer. I will try to perhaps touch upon a few issues that I consider dear to the work that I do, and the rights of operators and countries that are affected by labeling schemes. And there is plenty. We've seen the picture that Amarit shared with us. It's getting fairly, and frankly speaking, a bit too much. I speak as a consumer. That confuses me. It doesn't really provide much of a help to me. But those labels are voluntary. The vast majority of the labels that we've seen on that slide, and I don't have a slide of my own, I hope I'll be able to convey a few ideas as I speak. The vast majority of those labels are voluntary. And I have no problem with that. Voluntary labels are driven by industry, consumers, various souls in our societies, and labeling, just like sustainability in an even bigger sphere, actually answer to really important needs of our societies, and increasingly important ones. So I will talk more about sustainability rather than necessarily nutritional or environmental labeling. And the nutrition sustainability drive, of course, has been embraced by the EU with the Farm to Fork and the EU Green Deal. We know it's coming. We know that a labeling scheme that somehow will certify what is sustainable and what is not, will be a mandatory one, will be one adopted by governments, adopted into law, which is going to tell essentially consumers, if properly applied, what is sustainable and what is not. And there, I think, is where I come into the picture, typically because as a regulator, a legislator adopts a scheme which becomes mandatory, the rules of the WTO kick in. And I think those rules essentially, I know we are pressed for time, so I'll cut to the bare details of my presentation, but would require any legislator, including the EU, to exercise caution, to approach this multilaterally if possible. So you Pietro, were mentioning earlier the fact that countries often feel left out from this debate. The EU adopts schemes that have massive trade impacts, and it does so despite its consultative mechanisms on all of that, without often and always hearing the story of the people and the countries whose products will be affected most. So I think there are some good schemes beyond labeling, but in terms of sustainability, which we see operating, mandatory ones. I'm thinking of the flagged scheme for timber and forestry products. Has been adopted essentially unilaterally by the EU, but then is being voluntarily subscribed by exporting countries to the EU. There is the IUU for fisheries, illegal, unreported, unregulated fisheries. That also is getting traction, and there is a growing number of countries that apply it and that see the benefits of it and contribute to making it work. Then there are the instances, for example, the Renewable Energy Directive scheme for biofuels, which have been adopted unilaterally by the EU, plus hiding some hidden economic protectionist agendas, which are ending up at the WTO. And so you're seeing there the range of choices given to countries to regulate in a way that fears of the impact of trade or not, and the consequences that you may have. Essentially, I think that a scheme that were to be adopted by the EU on sustainable nutrition would have to be based on science as much as possible, on fact, on transparent facts, would have to be the least trade distorting, because it is clear that these instruments are distorting trade. They are costly, right? They range from a simple labeling scheme to a scheme that requires traceability, sometimes segregation, conformity assessment procedures, certification, all things which are very costly. And at the moment, we have what, 200 and plus and counting voluntary mechanisms. Those are costly already, but they are sectorial, sometimes very specific to a country, to a product. And so traders can deal with it. Other times, and if they become mandatory as a whole, they would be really, really difficult for operators, for players, especially in developing countries, to be complied with. So basically, perhaps my conclusion would be, I'm happy to then have a discussion on more specific issues, but it is clear that we are going in that direction. It is clear that our societies, our consumers, the planet need that. But as we embark in the process of mandatory labeling schemes, mandatory certification imposed by law, by governments, I think our regulators, our legislators, and I'm very happy to see that there are members of parliament here, need to be very careful in making sure that these schemes do not become disproportionately costly to comply with. They do not become hidden forms of discrimination against or among live products. They are the least trade restrictive. They're based on science, and they're based on public discourse and the sharing of the elements that drive the regulators that are transparent. And so other countries can contribute, can comment, and minimize the effects. I leave it to that, and I'm very happy to then be part of a discussion. Thank you, Pietro.
Thank you so much, Paolo, for going into details more, and also on the trade side, and particularly involving, as we said, from the last webinar that we got with the producing countries, the countries that are producing most of the ingredients that are coming into Europe. But you touch upon some very interesting points, like the cost of complying with certain scheme labeling and certification, the fact that they should be science-based, and this is often a conflict between simplification, the need to simplify for consumers, because consumers want to have something simple in front of them, and on the other side, science. And science many times and very often is extremely complicated. We had a very beautiful discussion on this. If you go on our website, I need to do some marketing, competere.eu. We had a discussion exactly, for instance, on what is going on in Mexico, what is going on in Chile, with the black dot labeling. That's kind of scaring. But here we have our second member of parliament, that is Pietro Fiocchi. Mr. Fiocchi, I would like to give the floor to you, and thanks for joining us. You were in the audience. I had to bring you from the audience into the panel. It's physically it's easy, but online it's kind of complicated, but we made it. Thanks a lot. Your floor.
Well, thank you very much, and I apologize for my getting in a little late. It is an extremely interesting topic, I can give a slightly different point of view as a member of the special committee on the cancer strategy in Europe, where, of course, the data tells you that 40% of the cancers in Europe could be avoided with a better lifestyle. Why do I say this? Because part of the problem is the incorrect or excessive diets. So from this point of view, of course, the BECA, how we call this special committee, is pushing for having a labeling that try to educate the consumer to eat the correct stuff. So this is the starting point. Obviously, and I agree with Paolo before, this type of labeling needs to be based on science. And for example, the most famous one in Europe, Nutri-Score, is based on a very complex equation.
I think we lost. Here you are again. Sorry, we lost you for a second.
Okay, here the problem starts, meaning that the very complex equation that is governing Nutri-Score is extremely good from a scientific point of view for processed food, but not so good for the basic food, because it's based basically on an assumption of 100 grams or 100 milligrams of consumption daily. And obviously, if I consume 100 milligrams of olive oil every day, is not extremely good for me, but maybe another type of food is different. The second problem here is, of course, that if you try to have a labeling which is good for the entire European continent, it's very difficult because we have a completely different diets. So to apply a scientific equation to the different diets that goes from Cyprus to the north of Scandinavia, it is extremely difficult because you have completely different type of uses and costumes and everything else. Number three, of course, then you have all the trade and commercial type of relationship. Nutri-Score is particularly controversial because there is an accusation by Dutch scientists that the French changed the equation to make it more friendly towards the French diet. Now, maybe it is possible, but again, if you have a scientific equation that covers this type of approach, you cannot change it for each country so that in Italy, Parmesan is good, and in France, Camembert is good, and so on and so on and so on, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. The commercial part, which probably Paolo is more expert than me, some of this labeling is being used by the distribution network and by the producer to have marketing and sales advantages over other products. For example, there was a famous distribution network in France that was giving a 10% discount on all the products with the Nutri-Score. So obviously, if you are a producer that are using Nutri-Score, either you use Nutri-Score or you have a disadvantage in terms of sales on that particular sales point, and so on. So it is a very complex argument. Again, it's been proved scientifically that on processed food, it works very well, and it could be applied all over Europe. On the basic food is much more difficult, and I do not think we have a real solution up to now. The other complication is that they are trying to add even more information to the labeling. For example, there is a proposal to put the type of hot gases emission on each type of food, plus, of course, the origin of the food, plus a whole bunch of other information. So the risk is that you're going to get a label that is extremely complex, so will not serve his purpose, which is to educate and to give good information and simple information to the final user. So I do not want to go to the supermarket, bring in a lawyer, an environmental scientist, and a biologist to understand what I'm buying. So this is extremely controversial. Nevertheless, it is important to have a simple system that gives some indication to the final user of what is good and what is not good. Or better yet would be formation starting from elementary school on the use and moderation of everything. But this is a totally different topic. So this is basically what I can say about Nutri-Score. We can go much more into scientific data and details, but I think it pretty much represents the situation as we see it. Again, there are a lot of commercial and national interest behind this fight between the different labeling systems. There is and I agree with Paolo, an associated cost, which is an important cost, especially if they're going to force you to get certification so you can produce the label and so on and so on and so on. Plus, and I can make a mention of the recent directive on packaging in Europe, in which you have to give the information in all the languages of the European Union, which is a nightmare, especially in the small packaging. So unless you find something easy, like a traffic light, for example, and it is extremely difficult to give all this information in 27 languages. So the risk is that you have to change the packaging and put kind of like we do in the medicine packaging, a big sheet of paper with all the 27 languages, with all the warnings, all the pictograms, and then so on and so on and so on, which could be incredible, because at the end, the average customer will take it and throw it in the garbage. So
Thank you so much, Mr. Fiocchi. Thank you very much for your inputs, and very extremely valuable. But now we get a bit confused, because our idea is to get to a solution. We start from the problem, why this problem is important, and then what kind of solution. And we understand and we understood that this is going to be a long process at the European Commission level, but also there will be a big discussion in the European Parliament. And we hope that we all together can be part of this discussion, and not just a top-down approach. And when I talk about all, as Paolo was mentioning, the entire supply chains have to be involved in this, because if one of the goals is to promote sustainability as well, you can't live outside those countries that are, or those parts that are producing, of course, ingredients that are flying into Europe. If I have to make a question, because I'm getting more questions through WhatsApp, please use the question and answer. And since there was a question about the presentation, you send an email to us, info@competere.eu, and with the permission, of course, of the presenters and the panelists, we will share the presentation with you. But if you have to give a solution, because here we go from a multitude of labels and certificates and little dots over a package to the European Union that could make one simple label, like certified by the European Union. That means it's healthy and it's sustainable. What is in between this? What is that we expect? Each of you, I will start with Amarit, and then I will end with the two members of Parliament. We start with you, we end with you. Amarit.
To be really honest, I have my doubts. I don't think we're going to have a single label which is going to be healthy and sustainable. The main reason is, what does sustainable mean? We've been covering this issue for over 10 years at our Sustainable Food Summit. Originally, 20-30 years ago, sustainable meant organic. It's been produced with no artificial pesticides, no agrochemicals, etc. But now, sustainable also means social impact. It's giving a fair price. And what about the economic pillar? Does it mean a fair price to all the distributors in the supply chain? What about the price the consumer pays for it? Is that too high, or is that fair? So I think the big problem is going to be in terms of defining sustainability what does a sustainable label mean? I think it's easier to do organic, it's easier to do fair trade, it's easier to do something which has simple metrics. But when you talk about sustainability, it's such a wide area, it's so holistic, it's going to be easy to do it for a single ingredient, like say palm oil, or for sugar, or to do it for wheat. But to do it across the board, I think it's going to be very challenging. I'll be very surprised if something comes up in the next 5 years, if not 10 years.
Thank you, Amarit, for being very optimistic in this. But you are right. And last time during our last webinar on sustainable nutrition, one of the main concerns was talking about zero deforestation. Probably nobody would dare to put something zero deforestation on their package, because of the great work some NGOs are doing, then they find a little fire and say that's a little deforestation. But let's come to a big conflict of interest, because Francesca, you have a conflict of interest, and of course you want your label, or you want your dot over there. So what can be RSPO position, if there is any, or your position on specifically on this?
So I think that what is important and what we want to achieve, for a sustainability scheme, it's not to put the label on products, and also that's why it's not mandatory for our companies. I think this is something that it's a nice to have, it's very important to have, but what we want to do with RSPO is to transform supply chains. So this putting the labels on the products can be a tool to communicate that, but it's probably not the only one. Something that we need also to consider when speaking about informing the consumers is that technology can really play a role on that. Now, most of our purchases do not even happen anymore in the shops, and the pandemic also was a turning point on that. Most of our even daily food shop has been done online for a while. So I think there will be many ways where consumers can find easily the information, which is not anymore the product packaging. So this could be something helping all this information to be gathered in one place and to be made available for the consumers. From our perspective, also there should be some policies and framework that could enable the voluntary standards to have more visibility and to be more. If we want to scale up the results of the sustainability standard and the great result that sustainability standards, I'm not speaking only about RSPO, also the other standards have done in the recent years, they need to be put in a framework where they are given the possibility to scale up the impact. I think something in between a mandatory European framework and the work of sustainability standard could be the path forward in terms of sustainability.
And do you believe there can be something in between health on one side and sustainability altogether, or these have to be separated?
It's very hard to say at the moment. Probably there should be something. It's also a matter, I think, about every consumer perception, and someone it may be more concerned about, the animal welfare or some sustainability issues. Someone is more concerned about itself and his own well-being. So it's very difficult to see if all of that can be just summarized by one label, and even if it's worth to proceed in this way, or maybe just going from the proliferation of labels that Amarit presented to us to maybe just 5-10 clear indication and framework for educating the consumers.
Thank you, Francesca, very much for your input, and congratulations for the great job you're doing in making at least the palm oil supply chain sustainable. Paolo, I turn back to you before ending with our members of parliament, unless there are specific questions, and I see actually some questions always at the very end are coming. Paolo, if you have to give a suggestion as a lawyer, and now you cannot say you are not a lawyer, as a lawyer, what can the Commission do in regards of what you said in terms, of course, misleading consumers? Because if we think about free from something, is somehow misleading consumers as well. Where should we go? You're a lawyer. You need your microphone on. Your mic.
A blessing in disguise, not being able to hear me. I was going to say that I disagree, for example, with Amarit when he says that the approach should be sector specific. Go and explain to the palm oil constituency why we're so adamant at regulating every single aspect of palm oil's sustainability, while we do nothing in relation to beef production, dairy production, soy production, or if not nothing, very little. So I think we got to be careful, because when we let the genie out of the bottle, we don't know where it ends up. Today, they are at the receiving end of our policies, which sometimes, unfortunately, are perceived, they may not be intentionally, but are perceived as being discriminatory, trade restrictive, protectionist as an agenda. So I think I would be in favor of a system which is open-ended. If we go down the, and I understand that we cannot start from having a perfect system all in place, but if it is a regulator that does so if you do it as a voluntary scheme, you concentrate on what you want. It is your right. But if my regulator, my legislator approaches this, it has to be on a erga omnes, approach, looking at all elements of sustainability. My recipe would be the regulator, the governments, then have to police the market. Enforcement is critical to me, and we are not getting that. Pietro, you were mentioning the no palm oil or the palm oil free labels. I personally have written torrents of literature on this, think that they are often illegal under the current existing EU rules. The Food Information Regulation, the Nutrition and Health Claim Regulation, depending on whether they are given to the consumers in a nutritional or environmental context, I believe that they are against the current EU rules. So the question is, are we doing a service to the consumers, or are we letting some rogue players on the market confuse and mislead consumers so that they can sell more of their products? There is the responsibility of governments to make sure that whatever scheme is adopted is then applied in a way that is in line with the rules. If the rules are not good enough, we need to change them. But I think the rules in Europe are good enough. So I would say enforcement is key, non-discrimination is key, and science-based. I appreciate Fiocchi's point of view that science is a difficult proposition, right? Because then you end up having nonsensical scenarios. But I think we are an educated, mature group of people, especially our regulators. They should be able to distinguish where it is necessary. We cannot have a single system that ticks off all the boxes, and sometimes we end up with the insanity. So I think I would focus on enforcement, non-discrimination, and a fact-based approach.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for these 3 taking points that we bring home. There's a bunch of questions. I just read one very quickly, and then we'd end with the 2 MEPs. There's one: how would one label work or one certification work for a cookie with multiple ingredients like chocolate, palm, soy, cocoa, sugar, and etc.? How that could work? Paolo, I start from you at this point.
Well, as MEP Fiocchi said, you better have a really large package, because if you have to squeeze on top of a single bar of chocolate 100 different labels and all the elements that define it, then good luck with it. I think there are some technical solutions, barcodes and things like that you can quickly check on your phone. So technology is moving quickly, and perhaps will render all of us obsolete. But again, I would say, remember that the food that is put on the market in Europe is to be safe for consumption. We have lists of ingredients that already tell consumers a lot of information that some astute marketer is now trying to double tell us. So we need to show on your chocolate bar which vegetable oil is used. Why do we need also to tell people what is not in the product if we already have labels that tell you what is in the product? So again, yes, we have little space, but let's make sure that we don't abuse or misuse the little space left to try and confuse consumers just for the sake of selling products.
Amarit and Francesca, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do. I think this is is not an easy problem to solve. I give an example. When you talk about sustainability, one of the big metrics you take is carbon footprint, and another one you take is water impact. And there are studies that you can grow oats in Finland and they'll have a lower water impact than the oats, say, in Spain or in Greece. So how do you measure oats which have a lower water footprint? And the same thing with greenhouse gases. Is it better to produce tomatoes here in the UK in a greenhouse and they're distributed locally to the retailers and to consumers, or to grow them in Spain without greenhouse gases and transport them the big distances? So this is the problem. How do you measure a carbon footprint, a water impact, renewable energy, when you've got a big continent like European Union, different weather, different soil, different energy usage, different inputs? How do you standardize it? To some, buying local is sustainable. Others means buying organic. Others mean social impact. So I think this is where the big issue is going to be if you're going to make it science-based.
And if I may add something to this also, I think that what sustainability schemes should be doing more and more is to not try to overlap and but also to reinforce the work of one another. Let me give you an example. Recently, the organic standard for Switzerland, BioSwiss, has introduced the reference to RSPO for imported products. So this means there is a cross-recognition, let's say, that the organic standard does not cover sustainability issues like social rights and stuff which is covered and integrated already in the RSPO standard. So this mutual recognition or references within the standard, I think it could support not the overlapping and the proliferation of other labels, not to waste the efforts of the sector and of the producer, but it could end up with good results for the consumers, for the products they get. So just another point of view to this interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Francesca. Very, very quick answer, Paolo. 1 second. You really have 10 seconds, and being in Italian is very hard. There's a question for you. Why, when we talk about palm oil-free claims, there's no enforcement? That's a question that just came in. You talk about enforcement. Why is there no enforcement?
Well, I would think that there are two answers to that. One is that we are not seeing ex officio enforcement by the administrative authorities of EU member states on the ground, and that is not an answer I can give you. The second one is that the industry itself is not up in arms and filing cases left and right. This happens in other more itchy trigger finger countries like the US, where there is a lot of litigation. In Europe, this has not happened, and people have gotten away so far.
Thank you so much, Paolo. Now, just to an end, I want to thank Francesca, Amarit, and Paolo. We have Stefano instead of Salvatore, the member of parliament, and Pietro Fiocchi. Stefano, do you want to add anything? You have anything you want to say as a last point?
Yes, very briefly. I agree with Amarit and Paolo. Is actually not possible at the moment where one single scheme, especially if it's binding by the European regulator, that can provide the right information to the customers. What we are working on right now, the European Parliament levels, is to be sure that there's no discrimination of any sector. So there's no any sector or any food in particular that is unsustainable or is bad for the health. But what we need is a certain education to the customers. So provide information, provide education, and in this way we can have the right choice that can bring to balanced diet and more responsible choices, not through one label on the product that will be actually can create more problem to the customer than vice versa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefano. Mr. Fiocchi, I leave the floor to you. We still have a minute to go to the hour, and then we're done. Thanks again for joining us.
Oh, thank you very much. The means to communicate there is, because if you think in Italy, you see a package with bio written on it, and people is willing to pay more money for the equivalent product, not bio, only because you had 3 letters. But behind those 3 letters, there is millions of euros of advertisement, social media efforts, and so on and so on and so on. So you don't have to explain what does that mean. People do not know. In my opinion, one of the efforts we should go on, and we are discussing this at European level, is to make the same level for everybody, both the internal producers and the importers, because that way you could level it a little more, making sure that you add one piece at a time, a concept of health on one side and sustainability on the other. So that at that point, all the food coming or being produced in Europe will have more or less the same standard in terms of use of pesticide, in terms of sustainability, in terms of health and everything else. That would make it much easier to communicate. I know it's difficult, but it's probably the only practical solution for this problem.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Salvatore De Meo and Stefano particularly for replacing him, Mr. Fiocchi for being here with us, and I'm sure you will join us more in the future. Amarit, Francesca, and Paolo, it's an incredible, gigantic discussion that we should take care of, and we would talk for the next 10 hours, and I know there's many more questions that are coming, and it's a big debate. We will continue with our Sustainable Nutrition platform, and we definitely need your encouragement, your support, and also your arguments and inputs. The event has been recorded, so will be available online. We can share the slides, of course, with the permission of the speakers. Keep following us. We will continue in the discussion, but at the very end, this is part of our principle as a think tank. At the end, the consumers is making choices. So what we have to do is really to empower consumers, put the consumers in the condition to make really free and freedom choices. And in order to do that, we need more and more critical sense and critical approach to whatever we read in terms of information, in terms of fake news, and then our capacity to make free choices. Now, thank you very much for being with us. Be safe, stay safe, and stay tuned and follow us for the next time. Thank you so much.
Bye.